Today I wanted to highlight an underrated character. So we're going to talk about Steel, also known as John Henry Irons. As always, we're going to talk about John's athletic abilities, his combat training, and his cardio, his diet, things like that. I'm going to be honest, there's a little bit of a spoiler warning for the video. This is going to be a little bit different than normal. And that's because John is much closer to Superman than you might think. Alright, so for some background on John. John Henry Irons originally appeared in the Death of Superman storyline. John was in the middle of a stint as a construction worker when one of his coworkers fell. John risked his own life to save his coworker, and in an ironic twist of fate, ended up almost falling to his own death. He was rescued by Superman, and Superman left an impression on John with the words, "Make it count for something." Following this, John tries to help Superman fight Doomsday. It's really crazy. He sees these two superhumans just slugging it out, but his inclination is to jump in and try to help. This is where the iconic sledgehammer comes into play. Things don't work out for John, but he still tried. From this point on, Superman is assumed to be dead, so John, along with a few other Superman copycats, try to step in to fill the gap. Now, from this point on, John pops up every now and then. He's had a couple of solo runs. He's had a few Elseworld stories. Those Elseworld stories are pretty intense. They deal with some heavy subject matter, but I do think they are worth reading. Now, Steel will pop up in some of the bigger events that DC has, but in general, he's not a frontrunner. He's not a mainstream character. And I think that's a little sad. For John's athletic ability, we can't count really any of the feats where he has the suit on. That would give him superhuman strength, and it would not be what my videos are about, because the suit is doing the work for him. Even without the suit, John is capable of impressive feats of strength. He's on a different level. He's built differently. I couldn't find a good source, but we're going to go with the idea that John is 6'7" and 290 pounds. So, how did John become this mass of muscle? Well, I'm not going to give too much credit to his construction career. And that's mostly because he just wasn't a construction worker for very long. And by the time he became one, my understanding is he was already a beast. Now, that's not to say that being a construction worker won't improve your strength or give you a muscular physique. It can help with that. Any job with a lot of physical labor will build strength, and it might grow a little bit of muscle. If you do some cardio, or if you just watch your diet, you might end up in a body that you're really happy with. You might end up with the levels of strength that you're really happy with. But for John specifically, the construction working was just such a small part of his career. I don't think we can count that. Most of his career seems to have been with a weapons company, and as an engineer, there's just nothing about that job that would naturally lead to you developing this type of physique or gaining this type of strength. What I think we can pull off of is his college scholarship. He got a sports scholarship, and I think it varies from football to baseball. I'm very confident that football has been mentioned, so that's what we're going to go with. So we can kind of look at how football players train. Depending on what position they play, they're going to train in different ways. They might focus on different skill acquisition types of training. You're not going to have someone in the center position training in the exact same way as your running back or as your quarterback. But in general, all football players are going to do a lot of running. They're going to do laps around the field, possibly as a warm-up, possibly as a punishment. If during practice a player does something that might cause a flag on the play, then the coach might punish the entire team. You might punish the only person who caused the foul by having them run laps around the field. And he might even do situations where if all of the players are running, the last one to finish has to run 2 more laps. So while some positions are going to have you running a lot more, in general there's always going to be some type of foundational running. Now the specifics are going to come down to what does the coach know. In general, we can expect a foundation of burpees and push-ups. A lot of high school coaches like those 2 exercises. It's going to lead to higher reps for the push-ups, so you'll start to get more into that muscular endurance rep range. Now, if the high school is well funded, if the coach is knowledgeable on exercise science and just physiology, then you might see more weightlifting. If they have the equipment for it, you might see a lot of squats, you might see some bench pressing. And you might see deadlifting. With these deadlifts, they would be more specific to sports, so they'll probably just be the concentric, so the person will pick the weights up, and then they'll let go at the top. They'll skip the eccentric. And this is to cut down on fatigue, cut down on muscular soreness, and to just focus on building that explosive power to get the weight up. Another thing we might see, and this again depends on the knowledge of the coach, we might see Olympic weightlifting. This is where you're going to get into the cleaning jerks and the push presses and the hang cleans. And these exercises, which you can see in the Olympics, they are good. They are great for building explosive power. You can also see these in CrossFit. Now, I don't personally know very much about the Olympic lifts. I feel like you really need a very good specialized coach to get into those, but I do know that they transfer very well to other sports. And then once you become a next level football player, you're going to have an emphasis on your bench press. How many reps can you get on your 225 pound 2-plate bench? So there's going to be some training that specializes in that. So of course for that you're going to have well developed deltoids, pecs, and triceps just from dialing that exercise in. Now, the problem is that football training can vary so much, and we have literally no proof on what exactly John did. So let's talk about what we do have proof of. John lifting a fridge and throwing it across a room. He's ripping a pew out of a church and using it as a bat. And then we see this really cool thing where after a disaster, he's lifting huge pieces of concrete on his back, kind of like in the form of a back squat, to keep it from crushing these children. We see him climbing down a cable or a rope with like 5 kids on him. If each kid weighs 30, maybe 30 to 50 pounds, then we have John holding 150 to 250 extra pounds on top of his already 290 pound frame. Rope climbing is an excellent form of exercise. It can hurt you if you do it too much or if you up the intensity too much. It can cause some type of elbow tendonitis. But if you work this exercise in intelligently, you can develop very strong, very muscular biceps. Of course, it's going to work your lats, and you should have pretty solid forearms. If you're able to somehow set it up, and if you can work it in gradually, rope climbing is a great exercise to add to a pool day. We also see John lifting Lex Luthor up with one hand. I've seen some people say that Lex probably weighs 210 pounds. And we see that Lex has a good amount of muscle mass on him, so I'm going to go with that. Lex Luthor probably weighs 210 pounds. So what we have is John front raising with one hand 210 pounds, and that's not possible. Now, it's pretty much common knowledge at this point that you can't hold anyone like that, just physics-wise, even if you are strong enough. Because of the physics of the position, you both will tip over. Now, even if you physically could, even if physics allowed for that, I don't think anyone's deltoids are strong enough to hold up 210 pounds in that position. Now, for his speed, we see in this situation, he's chasing after a Mustang. Now, the people in the Mustang are very confident that John won't catch them because he's on foot and they're in a car. But hey, guess what? John catches them. Now, to their credit, I guess, they say that John cut across the parking lot to catch the Mustang, so he didn't just straight up beat it in a foot race. But still, he caught up to a car on foot. That's pretty impressive. And I think it's worth mentioning that he does forge his own armor. There are times where he uses advanced machinery to make or to fix his armor, but then there's also times where he's just hammering it out, getting the metal the way he wants it to be. And, I don't think that's going to build the physique that he has. But it is physical labor. It seems like it's something he's very skilled at, so he does it very often. I think it would help develop his musculature in some way. And we can end on his introductory feat. He was saving his coworker from falling. So knowing that John weighs 290 pounds, we can use some of the information that I mentioned in my last video about Moon Knight, and we can see that the physics of John swinging will cause his body weight to be multiplied. Now, we also know that he's holding somebody else while he's swinging, so that other person's weight would also be multiplied. So again, I'm very fuzzy on the math. I'll see if I can link to Kyle's video where he talks about this a little bit better than I do. but it would lead to John weighing close to 700 pounds. Adding on the other man's weight, John is holding probably something close to over 1,000 pounds. And he's holding onto that with one hand attached to the cable attached to the rope. Just imagine how difficult it would be to hold on to 1,000 pounds with one hand. So, for his combat training, I've looked and I have not found any information on any type of combat training that John does. There are some situations where if I stretch things out, I can say, hey, he's tackling somebody. Maybe that's wrestling. But hey, he also played football, so maybe it's just football. There's another one where I can say, he's choking someone, so maybe it's grappling. This is all a stretch. I don't think John has any combat training. He has no realistic reason to be as competent in a fight as he seems to be. Now, as for his gear, he builds his gear himself. His armor is capable of withstanding many different attacks, some from Doomsday. It's capable of some type of anti-hacking defense. His hammer is also pretty cool. It functions in a way where the further it flies, the further it's thrown, the harder it hits. So instead of a maximum effective range like what an arrow or a bullet might have, or really any thrown object, his hammer is designed in a way where it just keeps on building up momentum and speed, so it hits harder. That's pretty cool. Again, no information. There is no information on the cardio training that John would go through. We can maybe say that some of the stuff he did when he played football, he still does. So maybe he's doing sprints, some shuttle runs or suicide runs, running laps around football fields. But specifically, what does he do? I don't know. There's no evidence. It's hard to get specific just off of his time playing football because the football training is going to vary from coach to coach. What drills are used, they're going to be different. I'm very confident in saying shuttle runs will probably be used. Just general running up and down a field, back and forth, short distances. But this isn't enough to base a routine off of. Same for his diet. I have no idea what John is eating. In this panel, where John was eating, the plate's clean. I don't know what he even ate. So even though I don't know what he would eat, for someone of that height and weight and muscle mass, I'm confident in saying that John needs to eat between 3,000 and 500 calories, all the way up to 4,000 calories. It depends on what he does. It depends on how active he is, but he has a lot of mass on him. He needs to eat a lot to maintain that. For protein, I'd like for him to eat anywhere from 260 all the way up to maybe 300 grams of protein. And this is just loosely based off of his body weight and muscle mass. If I had to eat that much protein, I would hate my life. That would suck. I think we can say that John has the build of maybe like Larry Wills. His body fat percentage is pretty low. Considering that he's 290 pounds, that's a lot of muscle that we're seeing here. And physically, he's just a large man. He dwarfs over quite a few different people. We see him next to Clark, and he's pretty close to literally Superman himself. Like, their builds are very close. And I can't even say that he'd have a strong point or a weak point. He's just very proportional, very well built. I guess maybe if we look hard enough, we can say that his calves are his weak point, but that's a stretch. John has every muscle maxed out in a way that is proportional. Now, for his psychology and his intellect. John is a very intelligent man. He designed and built his own armor and weaponry. His armor is extremely tough. It's capable of withstanding many different types of attacks. And then, like we talked about earlier, it's able to prevent itself from being hacked. You know, John also has an entire company, Stillworks. He uses this company to facilitate his ideas, and those ideas are along the lines of helping others. He's looking into things like providing energy to Metropolis, free, limitless energy to everyone. He's looking into helping the community by protecting the buildings with force fields when disasters strike. And we see that John's mind is creative and flexible. He's able to work with and begin to understand the mother box. Simply put, it is a super advanced computer that gods use. John's psychology is refreshing. It's a comic book, so the timeline is always a little fuzzy. But what we see is that John worked for a weapons company called Amertech. When he found out what the company was doing with his inventions, with his designs, he quit. He broke away from the company. And he, goes to become the construction worker. And after Superman tells him to live a life worth saving, to make it count for something, he splits with Amertech in a very public way. And I think that mindset that leads to him leaving his high-paying job shows in how he views Superman. John's entire thing is stepping up and making the world a better place. When Superman disappears, John doesn't expect someone else to fill the gap, and there were other people who tried, but John tried to fill the gap himself. And we see, even with the naming of his character, John Henry, that's a callback to John Henry, the legend that raced against the steam engine. I think that the John Henry legend is especially relevant today with AI being an up-and-coming force. And I like AI. This video is not really to talk about AI. But I'll just say that I do like AI, but I feel like we have to be very mindful of how we use it. John's physique is entirely unrealistic. He's impossibly lean for being anywhere near 290 pounds. In real life, to attain anything close to that would absolutely require steroid usage. John's build is reminiscent of a bodybuilder who maybe wants to stay proportional. His feats of strength are insane. He's lifting people, he's lifting concrete, he's lifting pews off of the floor of the church to use as a bat. He's larger than life. Don't take my rating of him being unrealistic as a negative. He's not supposed to be relatable. Batman, you could argue, is supposed to be relatable. Daredevil is supposed to be relatable. But I believe that John is not written that way. He is written to represent an ideal. He's supposed to represent something that we strive to reach, but that we fail to reach. If we understand fiction, and in this situation comics, to be a form of mythology and legend, then we can think about what is still trying to communicate to us today. What was John Henry trying to communicate to people in the past, and what is John Henry Irons trying to communicate to people today? Just as John strives to exemplify the values of Superman, and he fails to really reach the level of Superman, but he still tries, I believe that John's character, whether on purpose or through circumstance, has become its own legend, something we can try to exemplify in our day-to-day life. John represents strength for the sake of helping people, not strength for its own sake. So, I've thought long and hard about this. I'm not going to make a lot of videos about characters who are completely unrealistic, because there's no routine that will give you what these characters have. There's no routine that's going to get you what Superman has. Nothing's going to get you what John has. So there is no routine in the description. There's no sets of reps and sets and exercises. There's nothing for me to tell you to do because John doesn't train. He's just built different. He's a legend. The closest thing I would say is to look into a sport. I would be careful with football, especially if you're on the younger end. There are a lot of unavoidable hits to the head that shake up the brain and can cause long-term brain damage. And yes, I understand that I always point people towards combat sports like kickboxing or Muay Thai, but that's because you can use your words and you can tell your sparring partner, hey, don't hit me very hard in the head, or don't hit me in the head at all. And also, you're going to spend a lot of time working with pads or working with bags. You're not going to get thrown right into getting punched in the face. With football, it's literally the point. You cannot ask your opposition not to knock you over and hit you in the head. That's part of the game. So I'm a little hesitant to recommend playing football, but if you have flag football or some type of hobby, football club, then maybe they don't take it too seriously. You could join that. That might be a little safer. You can also look into something like soccer. Playing soccer or playing flag football for fun will give you a very good workout. It's going to get your cardio going. It's going to help you lose some fat, and you could very well end up building a body that you're proud of. Do a sport and then throw in resistance training with a hypertrophy bodybuilding mindset on top of that. Really any of my past routines, or if you look really hard on the internet, you can find a routine, or you can hire a trainer like me to make you a routine. Any bodybuilding routine plus training for a sport will get you moving in the direction that you want to go. You can also look into CrossFit to get into Olympic weightlifting, or you can just look into Olympic weightlifting. If you do that, I would strongly recommend you find a coach. Those lifts are very technical, and you can drop the weight on your head, But if you do them safely, they're awesome ways to build a lot of athletic power. But as I said earlier, I don't think that's the point of Steel. John is a myth. He is an ideal to reach for. His namesake is a message that human determination and strength is better than mindlessly throwing a machine at a problem. John Henry Irons, Steel, is a message that if you are strong, if you are intelligent, if you have some talent, and you do because everyone does, then you should use those talents in a way that helps your community, that helps the people around you. So go lift weights, go for a run, go play football, and then go and find a person close to you and make their day better, make their lives better. Go and do something with the physical traits that you're building. That is it. Thank you for watching the video.